All right, welcome back. Okay, a couple of moments ago, I just finished a retrospective on building an extension in Microsoft Edge. So if you missed it, you might want to go check it out. It's kind of cool. It's short and sweet, 30 minutes, everything I've learned while porting an extension from Chrome over to Edge. And browser's pretty good. The developer tools are quite good. And the conversion was actually really simple. Now, started a new stream because I have a huge backlog of open source stuff. I haven't looked at any .NET open source stuff for about a month. So this is going to be a triage. Apologies to anyone who's been waiting on my response. I'll be looking at reactive UI stuff first. There's a bunch of contributors who have been helping me out, and I've got to help them out. And as part of the motions of succession. So on that, I need to shout out to everyone who financially supports reactive UI. Thank you. Seriously, thank you. There's many times over the last year, I was just thinking is this even worth it? Seeing this number go up and to the right has been the thing that's kept me in and going, because it's proving that this has value and people value open source past consumption. Now we're just about to close about $5,000 US, and we might hit $10,000 this year, which is amazing. And people are starting to question, what are we going to do with these funds? What is $10,000 is a lot of money. And the plans on how we plan to use all the funds is all on the Open Collective website for Reactive UI. It's right here in this section, what we'll use the money for. And the idea is we're going to use these funds for the learning and development. We can hire a tech writer, or we can hire a designer. Just because we're open source and we do stuff for free doesn't mean others should join us in this pit for free. That doesn't work, right? And I've also thought a lot about and spoken with other people outside of the .NET space. Can we pay developers and other things like that? And the answer is, I don't know yet. One thing is needed though is the website needs to be better. We need better documentation, we need better samples. And asking people to do spec work, it just doesn't work. It's not a good idea. So the idea is we can start using some of these funds, and if someone starts helping out with the documentation, we can buy a copy of Kent's book and send them a copy of Kent's book in the mail. And that's $50, right? And that lowers the bar for contribution. We'll start rewarding those who help us. There's a stretch goal. If we hit a significant amount of money, we actually will be able to start actually having maintainers paid. And Reactive UI represents not just a MVM framework, it also represents reactive programming in .NET as a whole. So system.reactive not many people know this, but system.reactive is not maintained by Microsoft. It's maintained by the community. Right? And this has been like this for the last 2.5 years. And the last couple of months, since March, we came back from the MVP Summit, and the community was very hardline. No, we're going to fork. We're going to fork and charge on with the product roadmap. And we're at System Reactive 4 now. There's some alphas of 4.1, and the performance increases are insane, both on a CPU and also memory pressure basis. And we've managed to recruit some amazing people. It's writing lock-free code. Writing lock-free concurrent code is very hard. And we managed to get some of the people who were involved in the design of RxJava and from Netflix, and they come across and they're helping us in .NET. And this is all happening outside of Microsoft, and it's amazing. So how I got here is by financially supporting Reactive UI, you're actually supporting System.reactive. So if you use System.reactive and you want maintenance and support on it, Microsoft's not going to help you. It's the community. So if you support us, we'll support you. And as soon as we can get towards this stretch goal, the sooner we get to the point where we can actually start financing the maintainers to actually work and triage your pull requests. For now, one thing we do is the limit time I have for triaging pull requests is just really simple. If you financially support the project or the maintainers, you get triaged first. That's it. I'd love to build an extension for GitHub, and it goes into Chrome or Edge, and that hooks into Patreon or hooks into Open Collective. And what it does is it just or maybe even a GitHub bot, and it just signifies that someone financially supports the project, right? And that it's just a little bit of flair. It's very similar to how Twitch has flair on GitHub, and it just signifies that this person contributes and supports the project financially. And financially is not the only way to contribute. You can either contribute time or money. And one thing I found is we do get people contributing time, but really we just need money. Like at the end of the day, most projects need money, and because money can be used to buy design services and other services. All right, so that's kind of a long-winded thank you very much to all our people who financially support Reactive UI. Specifically, Ollie Levitt, who helped out in the last release. He's now started contributing $15 a month. It's quite a bit of money, but it adds up. Thank you. Anonymous donation of $15. That's amazing. Awesome. This is so cool. It's been amazing watching all these open source projects in the .NET ecosystem also follow these lead. And it's kind of cool to prove to people that this could be something. But a question I get a lot from people is Patreon versus Open Collective. What's the difference? So myself, I have a Patreon account, and pretty awesome. A mate of mine's come out of the woodwork. Thank you, John. And he's now shouted me a beer, right? And I actually have my own personal tiers. And in this case, I'm just going to go out and shout John some beer because he's supporting me. And that's one of the reward levels. But notice the language I'm using there. I'm saying me, right? Patreon is about supporting a person. And the money goes directly to a person. It gets PayPal'd or wired into a bank account. Now, this is a really important distinction because this has taxation implications. Whereas Open Collective, it's actually a front end behind a non-profit charity. Right here. A lot of people don't realize this, but Open Collective is actually, when you financially support an open source project with Open Collective, what's happening is the money is being transferred into a 501c6 entity. And that's the open source entity. That's administrated by Open Collective. Now, this is really, really important, is because the money is not going into my name. It's not going into a name of any of the maintainers. So when you support this project, it doesn't cause any taxation events on my end because money's not under my name. It's not my money. The money belongs to the project, and it's essentially accounted for in there as being allocated towards Reactive UI. So if I want to do if I want to incur an expense for Reactive UI, I actually have to submit an expense claim. Very similar to how corporate finance works. If I renew the DNS, and I have recently for 10 years through the funds by the contributors, I have to incur that expense, and then I raise an invoice and an expense to the Open Collective. And there's one thing Open Collect does is they look at it and they make sure it's proper and it fits within the guidelines of what is acceptable and not acceptable. And they process, and it either gets accepted or rejected. Now, if it gets accepted, there's a broadcast onto Twitter and also into the Slack room, and it allows everyone to know that there's been an expense incurred. So there's a huge level of transparency. With Patreon, the money goes to the person, and there's no transparency. And with Patreon, there's no way of succession. This is probably the strongest thing. This is why Patreon versus Open Collective. Open Collective allows for succession. And if you're running an open source project, you should always be thinking about succession. Because just because you created a project, or you spent the last 5 years working on a project, doesn't mean you should be working on it forever, for the rest of your life. You want to hand it over. Now, if the money through financial support is going for via Patreon, it means succession is much harder. Right? You've essentially mixed personal finances with business finances, and that's like a bad thing in business to do. Never do that. Never do that. Anyway, so it's a short spiel via Open Collective versus Patreon. So if you want to support reactive programming in .NET, please help at reactiveui.net/support. If you like what I do on Twitch and you want to support me personally and buy me beer, cheers. Go to ghuntley.com/support. Multiple options. All right, cheers. Let's get into this triage. Welcome back. All right, so here we have the Reactive UI Slack room. Now, if you don't have an invitation or you want to join this Slack room and you don't have access, it's really simple. You just head over to reactiveui.net/Slack and just punch it in there and then put in your username, password, and you get an invitation. Now, this is essentially the main community, not just for reactive programming in .NET, but also for Python, RxJS. I'd love to see the Unity folks join us. Unfortunately, they're not with us, but hey, UniRx, if you want to join us, that'd be like sweet. And also the .NET community as well, and Reactive UI and Akavash and all those other subsystems, because it turns out to know reactive programming, it's the concepts are universal. You know, how it's actually implemented is neither here nor there. It's once you know the universal concepts and the operators and how to look at streams over time and events over time, it really doesn't matter. We all hang out together and it's very easy to port knowledge from one thing to the other. It's really cool. Join us in Slack, it's really sweet. Now, we use Slack for Reactive UI because there was a time when the community died, right? Unfortunately, the project died, and the last 4 years been looking at rebuilding the community. It was succeeded. We've got something like 25 time zones worth of developers now, which is sweet. And I'd like to see us reduce our amount of time. We needed Slack for that period of time to build up the community again. But I'd like us to start moving towards GitHub a little bit more. So Slack is just a way of doing lo-fi communication, but it's not really public. I'd like us to be more transparent and more public. So it's kind of notes to the next maintainer. Maybe that's something we can do and change. Hey Glenn, so this covered at the beginning of the video, specifically monies for Reactive UI and Open Collective be used to support improving the accessibility of the project. That includes hiring a tech writer. It includes paying for new design for the website, translations, anything that makes this concept easier, and it's easier for someone to go from like looking at the website to actually running a full reactive application in 10 minutes. And then when they come back an hour later and they start poking with this thing and they want to learn more, it's really discoverable. If you want an example of really good documentation, look at the Kubernetes documentation. It's really good. So one thing we're doing now with Reactive UI is we're moving to more away from Slack and moving more to an RFC style process. That way, meta discussions like how we're going to use the financial budget happens open in the public. So I'm just going to open up this issue about like creating a plan for the budget, and in time people commented over it. It's still very early days with this process. One guidance I have for RFC, speaking with mates in the Rust community, and also in the Python community, like people get stuck in the RFC process and they ship RFCs and not actual increments outside the RFC, and they waste so much energy on the RFC process. One thing I wish when we're implementing this RFC process is we actually just use it as a way of being transparent, but we still get stuff done. Like if you use all your energy on the RFC process, then you'll have no energy to get stuff done. And how we're going to like have an arbitrator or mediator to like say yes, yay, or nay hasn't been worked out yet. So people have ideas how this is going to work. We use some sort of voting system. I just don't know. Up for grabs. Anyone's got any ideas, let me know. Sweet. Thank you very much for the people who have joined the stream. I'm Jeff. We're doing some triaging of open source projects. So I look after a project called Reactive UI. I inherited it by, I'm not the first maintainer, I think I was like the second or third maintainer of this, but it was originally created by Paul Betts. And going through the motions of succession, like handing it over to the next generation maintainers. And that's kind of the point behind these streams. And also this RC process is kind of like document it's like letters to the next maintainer. And I would normally be doing all this open source work just by myself. And instead of doing it by myself, why don't I just stream? Like if you've got questions about open source, finance and open source, getting involved in open source, or you want to help out Reactive UI, or you wondered what it's like to be a maintainer, this is what we're all here to learn and share. Cheers. Cool. That's really cool. Personal preference. Hi, Oni. Thanks for joining. Personal preference. I probably would have liked one more release before we bumped to V3, but I was completely absent. So this is like completely the right call. It's just to get it out there. Having no momentum in an open source project is probably one of the worst things. So if people don't stand up and say no, and in my case I didn't provide guidance, the best thing to do is just look at who has spoken and just proceed, right? And the goal is to minimize the amount of things breaking. So my logic here for maybe holding off for one release was there's some problems with NuGet resolution. We'll get to it later in the stream. NuGet, I get so much hell with NuGet. It comes down to the point we're in the middle of converting from package JSON to package ref, and different versions of Microsoft products use different versions of the NuGet client, and they're not synchronized in their release. So you might have it fixed in Visual Studio, but it's broken in workbooks, or it's broken in the NuGet command line, or it's broken in the NuGet SDK, NuGet CLI, or it's broken in Visual Studio for Mac. It's just hell. So in that scenario, I would have just maybe bought them a little bit more time, like fix the problems people are having with there's some changes we've made in System Reactive, bought them some more time, did one more release before we forced upon them a Xamarin Forms 3.0 minver. But you know what? It's about right time anyway. Pretty much Microsoft's moved on. They're not supporting the old 2.5 versions. There are a lot of people who are stuck on 2.5, but something that is always important to remember, this is as is, right? We write this software to fix our problems. And when I say our, I mean the people who are actively involved and engaged with the project. So if people want to have a say, there's two ways. They can support with time by helping out with the project, or money by financially supporting the project. And if someone financially supports the project and they voice up, they know we can't, we need a couple more months. If it's not too much hindrance, maybe we can accommodate that request. But ultimately, this software is made for us, and people can choose to use it, but if they choose to use it, that's their own choice. It's all covered in the open source license. It's got this clause that says as is. And as maintainers, we forget this. Open source software is created on an as is basis. So as much as you really want to support open source and you want to be working as a product manager and like making something grow, and it's amazing to make something grow, you got to remember it's as is. And until this point where open source is deemed financially valuable, even though it's given away for free, you have to have the priorities right. And unfortunately, I've shared my experiences with a few people, and I've gone to conferences like LinuxConf Australia, and there are a lot of people who just seriously just getting burned from open source. Like there's a lot of consumerism, and the cost is too high. So anyway. Cool, we can fix that. All right, so Reactive UI now has the notion of teams. I should probably go into that. Welcome everyone who's joined. Yeah, if you've got any questions about being an open source maintainer, .NET open source, you want to get involved in open source and .NET, you want to learn reactive programming, just ask. Like, this is an interactive time. Instead of me doing this by myself, I'm doing it with you. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. All right, welcome. All right, so this is Reactive UI's teams. Now, I'll quickly explain how teams are implemented and what we actually want from a team and the idea behind it. So in the main Reactive UI repository, in the GitHub folder, there's this file called code owners. And what this does is it's a pattern match. It's very similar to git ignore. It takes a glob or an expression, a regular expression, and if a file if a regular expression matches for that line, it notifies a particular team. So, for example, if you change anything to do with signing, it notifies the DevOps team. And the logic behind that is it kind of flips the way GitHub works into a pool-based model. It does make it a little bit more spammy, I'm sorry, but I found it wasn't working in any other way. We specifically need to go out and grab the attention of those who are volunteered to help for do DevOps. And what happens is you get a notification and it asks you to review a pull request. So I'll show how that all works in a couple of moments. So in this case, we're split into different teams. And because Reactive UI, I think it's like 12 different platforms or 13 different platforms, it's too hard for someone to learn all the different API services and how like iOS works versus Mac versus Android. And I went through it, learning all these APIs, and I'm glad I did it, but it's too much to ask someone who wants to get involved with the project. The bar's too high and it makes people scared, and it's for legitimate reasons, right? So the idea here is we use the new project SDK in GitHub. So project SDK reference in .NET, and we use MS Build conditionals based on includes, conditional includes. Let's fix the audio. And yeah, if it matches, it just pings the iOS team. Pretty simple. Likewise, if anything changes in the Mac, pings the Mac team. Now, right now we don't have enough people in our teams. So if you know Android and you want to get involved with Reactive UI in the project, just say hello, jump into Slack. It's at reactiveui.net/Slack. Jump in the Succession channel, which is this one over here, and just say, hey, I want to help out. And we get you into a team. And once you're in the team, you'll get notifications to review pull requests. And you'll only get notifications that matches your areas that you're comfortable with. So if you're comfortable with Android, we could add you to the Android team. If you're comfortable with Mac, also to the Mac team. But it means you wouldn't get any notifications for UWP. And it's been working pretty well, but we don't have enough depth in our teams. All right, here's an example. So over here, these are the reviewers. These have been automatically added by GitHub via convention because the code owner file exists. So in this case, the files are adjusted, tripped for the Android team, and it sent a request for the Android team to review the changes in here. Previously mentioned, we don't have enough depth in our maintainers. We'd love to have more maintainers. We'd love to have tech leads for each one of these things, from Fody to Android to iOS to UWP. If you know those platforms and you want to be the lead in those areas, it's up for grabs. We need your expertise. Anyway, here's our teams. Now, you have lots of different groups in there, but really everything exists under the maintainers group. If you're a maintainer, you have write access to Reactive UI, only and Splat and Akavash, nothing else. But we work on the default premise that people don't want to break software, they don't want to ruin the software. We have a bit of a vouching system before someone joins the team and joins the project. And the social pressure we've found is just enough to stop people from ruining software. And we have rules configured that they cannot merge the software. No self-merging is allowed. It needs to be reviewed by at least one other person. So that adds a peer review aspect to it. Plus, we don't automatically release. So if someone does something dodgy, we can just revert the commit, right? And there's a full audit trail, and I think there's enough social pressures that we don't need to be too selective with commit bits. Hopefully I never have to review that opinion. I really hope so. But we also have other security measures, like you can't be a maintainer of reactive UI unless you have 2FA enabled. So everyone must have Google Authenticator configured. So that adds even more security. If we want to take the security to the next level in time, we can do enforcing signed commits. But I think it's a little bit too soon for that. Let's get more people joining the team, and then we can add more to it. So Glenn here is asking, we need a tvOS team. So what's happening here is we're adding a new platform by the looks of it. So who's doing that? Sweet, Glenn. Thank you very much. He's adding tvOS as a supported platform for reactive UI, which is amazing. But at bare minimum, to support this, we need to add a team in here for tvOS, for people who specialize in tvOS. There's probably a large crossover between API between the Mac team and iOS team. But one thing we want to do is be able to test it on real hardware, and we can't make the assumption that people have tvOS, like a physical tvOS and Apple TV devices. So this allows us to specifically target that situation. So let's create the team. Oh, actually, no. Glenn is bringing over work from Emmanuel Villa. Thank you, Emmanuel. Awesome. Man, thank you. Also, something that needs to be fixed. Glenn, you've been doing a splendid job the last couple of months. I have no objections to give you high-level access. So you've stepped up. You've been doing a lot of help with the community. So I think it's only wise that you shouldn't take a dependency upon myself. You should be able to create these teams. You should be autonomous. So let me just fix up your access. And welcome back. So, Glenn, you are now a administrator. Um, please don't do anything wrong. Use your discretion, communicate, use your powers responsibly. I have no doubts you've been doing a fantastic job over the last 6 months. And the last 2 months, you've really been stepping up and helping out with maintaining this as I step down. So, thank you. It's probably a little bit too big to review all now. Uh, um, Thank you very much for sending the pull request in. I spotted one thing. We'll just fix that event generator, and also we'll need to review this in more detail. I haven't done a proper review. Hey, thanks for joining. You've got any questions about open source and .NET, what it's like to be a maintainer, if you want to get involved in an open source project, if just say hi. Yeah, it's a moderate sized PR. It adds a new platform, and I don't have my Mac set up right now to actually review the pull request properly, so I can only really eyeball it. There's one thing I do need to do, however, and that's add support for the teams. So I can do that without doing anything major. So let's pull this down. Awesome. Yeah, I was really interested. Like, I understand life gets in the way. Like, I've got family now, so I'm having to. I've had for about 4 years now, but they're now at an age where I've got to actually invest into them, like even more so than I have been. So I've got to reduce the amount of open source stuff I do, but I don't want the project to die again. Like last time, a maintainer had to move on. Unfortunately, there was no succession. There was no successor. So this is the point of the stream: is to actually like record my thoughts and invite other people and create opportunities and advertise that opportunities to get in there. So look, good luck. I completely get it if you are unable to contribute, but when you are, we're here. We definitely need your expertise. Even if you don't know anything about reactive programming, just helping join the learning team and working on the documentation, or just small little spelling mistakes, that's all helping move the project forward. So good luck with the job change. And interesting enough, you're saying winter is coming. It's currently winter right now here in Australia. It gets pretty cold. I've had a couple -1 degree days out here. It's been very cold. I've got a heater on underneath me right now. And plus these lights, they're quite warm. So one thing we covered before is we're separated into teams. I've created the new team, but we need to create the trigger to notify the team, and that's done by modifying the code owners file. And that's it. Like that's all that needs to be done. So I'm just going to ship this commit, push it back to that branch, we'll trigger CI, I'll add some comments saying that the team has been created. Once this gets merged, it'll notify the team, and it's all working. There's probably one last thing is I suppose you should actually create some written guidance of what I just done, so people don't have to go through the video. Let's just double check this path, platforms, tvOS. And we're good. Awesome. Wow, Germany. Whereabouts in Germany are you? Wow, 35 degrees. I won't have that for about maybe 3 or 4 months from now. We're still heavily in winter here. Now, there's a cool feature of GitHub. When someone raises a pull request, by default, there's a little tick box done, and that tick box allows the project that you're contributing to, the pull request to, gives them write permission. So I'm about to push into their branch on their fork. It's a really cool feature, and it removes a lot of friction. So they'll get a notification I'm doing this, and yeah. And the rocket's off and away. We've shipped a commit to that person's branch. Whoever sent this pull request in for the coloring, that's really cool. Thank you for doing that. That's new in the last month. That's really helps with accessibility. It's small little things people can do, just little tweaks, white spacing, colors, even this. I'm not happy with this branding. It's not concise enough. It talks about technical, it doesn't talk about business value. If I was to put a slogan for Reactive UI, it's define the business logic in a singular place, compose your business logic again and again, and it's like a building blocks. They stack upon each other. Shush, thank you very much for following. Welcome to the stream. We're just doing some open source triaging. So yeah, Reactive UI is a framework for building with the reactive extensions, user interfaces, and these user interfaces work on 13 or now 14 different platforms. It's really cool. If you've never seen it before, I could probably show you if you're interested what an application Reactive UI is. Let me know in chat if you're interested in this. But when I talk about the value prop here is most of the time when you make software or user interfaces, you run into these state problems. And the problem is you define the state at the top of the class, in the middle, and you're mutating it all over the place. And it's just hell. With Reactive UI, you define the business logic in a single place, and then you can then compose other business logic off that business logic. And I find personally there's a bit of a hurdle learning these techniques, but once you do, as the application gets more complex, you don't lose developer velocity, and no one else can make that claim. And this is why I've stuck with Reactive UI for the last 5 years. Because that is just so stupidly compelling. Is not, as the application gets more and more complex, you're not losing developer velocity. That's amazing. Cool. Ski Toy, thank you very much for financially supporting Reactive UI. This is the first time I've noticed. Apologies for not thanking you sooner. So thank you. So on the Reactive UI website, we have a contributing section, and it's a little bit out of date. And if you find content that's wrong or out of date, just delete it. Like, when in doubt, just delete it, because old stale information is just bad. We can always go back for the history and bring it back alive to add the information in there. So let's add some guidance on how to create teams. There you go. This is like, what the heck's happening here? That's an easy pull request. If you're watching and you want to dig in here so I can focus on writing the content, I'll just set that pull request. That'd be amazing if you could fix it so this lines up properly. One tick. Let me just switch across and then see how the CI is going. I need to log into some privileged sections, so I've just got to switch to a different screen for privacy. Welcome to everyone who's tuning in. We're doing some open source triage work. This is what it's like to be a project lead on an open source project. A lot of the time you're not actually looking at the code, you're actually supporting other people contribute more. Like the goal of any open source maintainer or project lead is actually trying to work as a multiplier of effect. So don't necessarily answer questions directly, but if you do, make sure you write them down and create written guidance for the next time around, because it's so annoying when people just keep coming back asking the same thing again and again and again. And if they're doing that, that's a failure on you as a leader. So here I'm just going through and servicing requests from people who've been waiting on me for about a month now. So apologies, but life gets in the way. Open source is as is. And as we go through this, we start removing the friction that prevents people from contributing. And hopefully as we remove the friction, more people contribute. And we always need people contributing in open source. But a lot of people put too much value on code contributions. Just doing this, just going through the motions of triaging is like infinitely more valuable than code. Like community stuff is so much more important than code, because if there's no community, there's no one to review your pull requests, well, the project's dead, right? So if you're wondering how you can help out and you're still learning, just help with this type of stuff. Like it's not hard. It's actually quite mundane, quite boring. And we just grab a beer and just do it, and help other people out, going through the motions of reviewing code. You focus on what you're good at. Also, I'm going to change the tunes. Any requests? I'm thinking like disco. Poolside disco. If anyone has any other better ideas or any other requests for genres, let me know. Until otherwise, it's poolside disco. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right, so we're in Visual Studio Online. This is the .NET Foundation instance of Visual Studio Online. So I've sent I shipped a commit to the website. Hopefully it's built and deployed. I just need to check this because I saw reports that deployment wasn't working properly for the website. So let's figure out if it is working or not working. Now, we don't host any source code on Visual Studio Online. It's all on GitHub. We just use their most excellent release management functionality. It's really, really good. Like if you can build Windows and ship Windows, it's good enough for us. Considering that we target 13-ish, 14 now different platforms, building reactive UI is quite a chore. And this does it for us. We had some problems previously, and they don't exist anymore. I love it. It's so good. Cool. Last build was good. Last 2 minutes ago. So it's built success. I'd love to be able to get rid of like this CI step. As soon as YAM supports .NET Core, we'll be able to get rid of this CI step completely and go all in on Netlify. I know I don't need to harp on this. I know you want to do this. I know you're doing it. It's just when you get time, it'd be amazing. Thank you. All right, just gonna switch screens for privacy a sec. And welcome back. All right, so the deployment succeeded. So what happens is we use YAM right now for our website, which is really, really good because it's got the generator for the public API service. It also does have blogs, the rest of the website. I'm really happy with YAM. Just if it was running .NET Core, I could get rid of this step. So what this step does is actually compiles out to an artifact zip file, and the next part of the deployment, we have a deployment step, and that takes the zip file and posts it to Netlify, and Netlify then does a deployment on AWS CloudFront, and just works. It works really well. So let's see if the website's live. And we're live. CI's working. Welcome. That's pretty cool. We've now got 7 people watching. That's awesome. If you've got questions about open source, reactive UI, you want to help out, ever wonder what it's like to be a maintainer, questions about finance and open source, these are all questions I'm happy to discuss. Don't be strangers. Say hello in chat. I just gotta throw that tweet out and retweet it. And done. All right, sweet. On some of the most pressing stuff, it's time to look through the RC. So reactive UI is now running through an RC style process. Instead of it just being myself making decisions and people not knowing. Yeah, instead of myself just arbitrarily making a decision, this is a way of just putting more light on it, be a little bit more transparent. So we're having these discussions, but one thing we're just mindful of is we do actually need to do things. So if it's been open for a week or even 2 weeks and there's no responses, just proceed, right? If people want to have a say and they want to change the direction of the project, they've got to step up and become involved in the project. But please don't spend all your time debating the RC. Hey, Thinx. Okay, so your question is, so the question is, how do I get started in open source? Can I categorize the type of projects that you can contribute to? All right, so this comes up all the time. It's not a stupid question. I personally got heavily involved in open source about 6 years ago, like heavily, to the point of becoming a maintainer of a very large project. Welcome, ASICS. Thanks for following. And at the time, I got involved, and this is a common thing I speak with other people. They got involved because they met someone, right? They didn't go out and try and find a project. They met someone, right? And that someone convinced them that it was something good. There's opportunity here, and that seems to be the common thread. So this is actually the core reason behind streaming, is to actually, that exact question you're asking right now, is Do you want to learn about reactive programming? Like, what do you know? When you say you're a newbie, are you a newbie to software development or newbie to open source? Let me know. There's plenty of open source projects in .NET. People just like myself who need people just like yourself to help out. And it doesn't necessarily have to be code. It could be helping with documentation or fixing CSS issues on a website or helping with marketing. There's so many things you can do to help out. Let me know. So yeah. All right, sweet. Awesome. Okay. So you're new to contributing to open source. What software do you currently use? Do you do mobile development with Xamarin, or do you do ASP.NET.Core? What type of developer are you? And if you could look into... Cool. If you look into like a project used in your workplace, can you just look at the packages.config and just like, is there any open source project in there that you particularly use? Because that's a great candidate where to start, is contribute to something that you actually use. That way, when you're contributing, you're learning about the thing that you build on top of, and that knowledge is directly applicable. Right? And as you understand the dependency you build upon, you become better in your workplace and your performance increases because you understand there's less black boxes. Welcome, Ton. Welcome to the stream. We're doing open source, and if you've got questions how to get involved in open source, let me know. Oh, totally, man. Like, doc is seen as this thing that's really, really hard. Really, it's just like a small little change, notes to yourself. A couple moments ago, about 10 minutes ago, I was writing some guidance on how team management works. And it's just a small little note, and just having that small little note is everything to the next person, and that next person can build upon it. Just even small smelly mistakes, that's fixed. Deleting documentation that's no longer valid, that's like massively valuable. I wish more people would write documentation, but don't get stuck on the word write. Maintain documentation. So yeah, it's really cool that you watched my videos on reactive programming. It's really, really cool. It'll probably take you about 6 months to get up to speed. There is a cliff. There legitimately is a cliff to learn reactive extensions, but once you've learned it, you've got the knowledge for life. It's kind of like unit testing. Once you know how to unit test code, it's much simpler. You can take those principles of unit testing code to Ruby, Golang, Java, .NET. It's unit testing. The same thing is true with reactive programming, with reactive extensions. All right, so I see that you mentioned that you normally work on backend. Do you use Dapper at all, or do you use Entity Framework as your ORM? Or do you not even use ORM? Go into your open source project. So go into like a work project, look at your packages.config or your package ref, and don't share the contents. Please don't share the contents. But see if you find an open source project in there, and let me know like the name of one of those open source projects, but please don't disclose any of your company intellectual property. It's very easy to accidentally share something you shouldn't, so don't. But if you're using something like XUnit or NUnit or Dapper, I need a reference to be able to guide you.
Give me a chance to make it right. Just let me touch you like the first time. We don't need answers to survive. Just let us keep on with the black guys. With the black guys. Hanging up to see if you would call me. I miss you more when you seem too far away. And you can blame it all on me as long as we can find our way. Do you remember all the times we tried to stop this? Yeah, we end up the same every time. Cause when our bodies meet, there's nothing left to fight about. We're holy when we touch anyhow. Give me a chance to make it right. Just let me touch you like the first time.
Welcome to the stream. Thank you very much for the follow. Thanks. I see that you're using Poly, Entity Framework, Mock, and XUnit. They are actually really good. I can work with that. Just let me finish up this comment. Wow, we got 13 people tuning in. All right, so we're just doing open source triage in the .NET space. If you want to get involved in open source, questions, where to start, I'm happy to direct you to other maintainers like myself. What I do need to know is which open source projects you use, and then I can give you some ideas on how you can help out. I'll finish up on this, and then we'll move on to helping out people with questions.
So give me a chance to make it right. Just let me touch you like the first time. We don't need answers to survive. Just let us keep on with the black guys.
Shikada, thank you very much for the follow. Welcome.
Just let me touch you like the first time. We don't need answers to survive. Just let us keep on with the black guys. We are sweet on our secrets. Telling black guys to keep
Oh, completely. So, yeah, one of the most classical things we can do is like the first pull request is just making a fix in the README. So, Thinex, if you're up for it, maybe that's what we do. Let me just pull through the chat history. I've finished with this GitHub issue, and I'll focus on servicing you rather than the project. One tick. All right, so I finished with some of the reactive UI stuff. Let's help you do your first pull request open source. Okay, so yeah, I generally advise people not to join a big project, and XUnit's not a big project, but there is a lot of complexity to the project. Fortunately, they've got really good maintainers. I know a couple of them, but you will potentially, I don't know the scope of the feature you want to implement. The guidance is for pull requests is open a GitHub issue, specifically starting a conversation saying, I would like to add this feature, the rationale. So here's what you would normally do. Open source is that simple. Always remember, open source is essentially just people just like myself. We do this as a volunteer. The project's XUnit, for example, that's all volunteer labor. There's no one paid to do open source of XUnit. So be respectful, because they could be watching Netflix or helping you out. And you always remember, you're competing against Netflix. Right, so whatever you're doing, you should have an appropriate level of tact, and you should be thankful for the work that they do. When reviewing a request for a feature, the most important thing is like someone articulating what they're trying to do. Like, I'm trying to add this feature to XUnit because I've tried this, but I couldn't do it. I think I need something like this. And it just needs to be kind of like a couple paragraphs. Some suggestions on how you think it could be implemented. If you don't know how, ask for mentorship. But more importantly is the final remark. Say that you're willing to do the work if someone helps you. This is something right here everyone forgets. A lot of people create the issue, but they don't say they're willing to help. If I get a GitHub issue and someone says, I'm willing to implement this feature if you help me, then I'm willing to help that person more than if they just create it using GitHub as a support desk. GitHub is not a support desk, right? You want to start a discussion before you spend your time implementing the work, because you don't know the code base and you could be implementing a change in the code base and it has side effects you're unaware of, or the feature you're implementing may already exist. Maybe it's not documented correctly. So no one likes wasted effort. So start a discussion early, open a pull request early. When you start doing the work, open the pull request straight away. Like, as soon as you do your first commit, and your first commit should be within an hour, you push it up and start a discussion. That is the best way for it to be successful in open source on a new feature. But that is, I don't recommend people create new features for their first pull request for open source. As Tiz mentions, the best way in open source is like a pull request or on the README or something very small and tiny. And that kind of, you can test the health of an open source project on how long it takes for them to merge trivial stuff. If it takes weeks or months to review, that's fine. There is no SLA in open source. Zero. It's totally fine. It takes a month to review a pull request. There's no SLAs. But that might be an indicator to yourself if you're looking to get involved in a community. Either that's a call to action for yourself to get more involved, or maybe you want to find a community that's a little bit more established until you're more comfortable working without the safety rails. So you use Poly. Let's see what open source projects use. XUnit, Mock, Entity Framework, and Poly. Okay, so Entity Framework is too big. like for your first pull request, way too big, and there's corporate governance via Microsoft. So let's just kill that. Mock is, I haven't gone through and done a pull request from Mock, but it is a more mature thing. I think it's getting to the point of feature complete, but that's an assumption. Let's find out. XUnit has a really good maintainers, so that could be a good place for contribution. Let's have a look at Poly. I know Poly is actively maintained. This is simple. This could be done in an hour. Like if you're looking to contribute to a pull request, start here. So Poly is using the new project. I believe they're using the new project file format. Let me just double check. Yep, they're using new project file format. This is going to be really simple to change. All right, so you have some. The reason why I say this is going to be simple to change is there are upstream examples. JSON.NET, Humanizer. So you've got referenced examples, so you can study how it's done. So the protocol to help out with this is just really simple. That simple. Like just say, hey, I'd like to work on this. If you don't hear back from me in the next week, then I just didn't have time. And that essentially means if you don't get around to doing the pull request review, the next person can come around, and if you didn't get around to implementing it, the next person can just go, well, it's been a month, it's been 2 months. Okay, it's stale. I'll take a stab at it. And this is also the time to solicit guidance. I need some help implementing this, or I'd like someone to review the pull request, identify who's going to help you. Just ask. It's that simple. The alternative is you can just send the pull request in, but if you've never done much open source work, I recommend not doing that until you have an established relationship with the person. That's contributing open source. So really cool. For the next, Poly. If you use Poly at work, help out the project by sending in a pull request. Let's see what else could be done. All right, bunch of feedback there. If you have opinions about how the API should look, jump in there. That's just commenting on a roadmap. That's a form of contributing to open source. Is an example of contributing. So this README, right, this acknowledgement section is getting quite large. I did the original PCL implementation of Poly like 4 or 5 years back. That's me here. Do I really need to have my name in the README? Like, the README is getting quite big. Like, that's a lot of information to consume. This could be moved into an acknowledgements file. Open discussion, move this into the acknowledgements file instead of a section there. Blog posts, for example. Maybe the README is not the best place for it. Maybe this should go onto the website. Does a website exist for Poly? Maybe there should be a section on the website for blog posts. Maybe the README is the right place, but that README is starting to get quite big, right? Very big. Might be enough content now to actually start creating a website. So just some ideas on like how you can contribute to open source. It does not need to be code, and some of the best contributions is just making it more accessible. Yeah, so for reactive UI, we've got this resources section. So anytime someone does a public talk, it gets put in here. And funny enough, this is out of date. So let's fix it. Oh, completely. So out of date documentation is maddening. I'm a consultant by day, and one of the most infuriating patterns companies do, and it's like a complete anti-pattern. They have a Confluence wiki, and nothing wrong with Confluence, but what they do in Confluence is they disable the ability to delete pages. And as soon as they disable the ability to delete pages, what happens is you get a lot of incorrect content in the wiki, and the teams no longer trust the wiki. They lose all faith in it because you can't delete incorrect content. And it's completely the wrong approach. Like, if you have problems in your company, the best thing to do in your company is that's a HR issue. It's not a technology issue. Like, if someone deletes the wrong content, like maliciously, then that's a legal issue. Enforce it via the legal system, via their employment contracts. Do not cripple the ability of your company to actually like prune incorrect information. It's really, really important that everyone has the ability to delete like pages that are no longer valid. If you input, there's plugins to do peer review, so like it needs like 2 people to agree upon deleting. That's a little bit over top, but I understand there's regulated markets and that's needed in some places. But yeah, incorrect documentation is maddening and it's dangerous to a business. And also from software developers, a lot of people these days, they have tight deadlines of how to do something, and they have a high expectation that the documentation will allow them to achieve the task they're doing without having to look under the hood. Now, it's really important that people do look under the hood and understand what they're building upon and like correctly technically assess how things are. But having the documentation right is really important, like, because if people have bad experiences, they're not going to look under the hood. Right? A lot of people do judge the book by the cover. So yeah, that your experiences about API documentation not being right, and um, being the first to notice it, and then watching over a couple of days a bunch of people reporting the same issue, it's it's real. Always send that pull request for docs when they're out of date. All right, it is getting a little bit late. I'm probably going to be up for another 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I'm just going to review some other miscellaneous GitHub requests. So if anyone has any questions about .NET, open source, getting involved in open source, reactive UI, let me know. So the software I'm using here is Octobox. Like if you are doing if you're doing a large amount of open source work, you're on an open source project, or you just really actively involved in open source, you need to be using Octobox. It is like so good. Disable all email notifications. This is my recommendation if you're doing open source, is disable all email notifications, or filter them very heavily. And basically, if they're not a co-worker or like your best mate or someone that you would like wake up 2 a.m. in the morning to help out, delete the GitHub notification email. Like only allow super critical notification emails. For everything else, remember the open source software is as is, and create a time box. This is my time box with you right now. We're going through these. And if I manage to fix these things, I manage to fix them. If I don't, it's as is. And this is why Octobox is so good. It just allows you to just go process. Cool. So if you're watching, there's this, I use DNS Simple for my DNS providing, but the .NET API doesn't support net standard. I don't need this enough to dedicate time to actually convert it across. One day I might actually convert it across. But if you're looking to help in open source, you're looking for an easy thing to do, create a developer account at DNS Simple, say hello to Anderley, and ask if you can help out. Personally, I would split this pull request into two. I would convert over to net standard using the existing APIs, do a release, and then do a separate pull request that implements the v2 of the APIs, and then do another release. Just split into two different increments, and that just makes it, just increases the pace and the velocity. So if you're looking for something to do in .NET open source, this is a project that needs help. You're helping myself out, to be honest, I probably won't be getting involved with this. I don't need it that enough. But yeah, if you want to help out, this would be really cool. Robert, I'm sorry this has been sitting for a month. So it's been sitting for a year now. I'm so sorry. This is another thing. Reactive UI and other .NET projects use Git Release Manager to automatically do continual deployment. And how that works is off the GitHub labels. And there was currently a restriction that allowed only one label per GitHub issue, and this PR relaxes that. So I don't know if I won't have time to review this tonight, but if anyone's watching and they want to do some open source stuff in .NET, help review this pull request. It's I'll dump the issue in chat. Everyone's ready to go for it. It just needs someone to just eyeball it. Welcome to the stream, Nizuki. Thanks for the follow. Cool. If you want to get involved in Haskell rather than .NET, is another opportunity in open source. The Haskell community has had some problem with spammers recently, And one of the things they wanted to do is add captures to the package upload. So if you know Haskell or you want to learn Haskell and you want a small little project, this could be it. Add captures to Hackage, which is the package server of Haskell. There's two parts to this thing. One is adding the captures. That could be one pull request. The other thing is just adding very basic things like no follow on H links, and it removes any benefits for spamming, and it penalizes people. So that again, it removes the benefit of spamming the Hackage or Haskell package index, because spammers spam dodgy uploads, and when they upload dodgy packages, they get link juice. This removes the link juice, so this is how you can help out. Alright, so this is an interesting GitHub issue. Let me just kill the music. This is a very interesting GitHub issue. So reactive extensions is not maintained by Microsoft or any Microsoft product groups. It's maintained by the community. And because it's maintained by the community, the documentation, the MSDN documentation has had to be deleted, had to be archived. It can no longer be found. So if you're looking for documentation on how to use system.reactive, previously historically for the last 13 years, it's been available on the Microsoft website. It's now gone. And it won't be rectified until a product group within Microsoft take ownership of system.reactive. We're happy to have the community do our thing with a roadmap, but we kind of need an internal champion within Microsoft to help fix this, because this is really broken. We publish system.reactive under the system namespace. So the community is publishing packages underneath the system namespace, which is okay. It's kind of bad because people assume that if it's under the system namespace, it's made by Microsoft. But this is not made by Microsoft. People assume they can log help desk tickets, support tickets. They can't, because it's maintained by the community. So people are choosing the package because they think it's made by Microsoft, but it's not. It's made by the community. And the next thing that's kind of bad is security, right? All the work that we do in the community is done on an as-is basis. It doesn't go through the Microsoft security secure at process. None of that doesn't exist. People assume that it is. It's not. It's done by the community. And this is just like the double whammy. It's just, we're going to delete and archive the old documentation. So if any product manager in div dev wants to fix this problem, please do, because I'm kind of over it. All right, cheers. Jinx, welcome to the stream. Anyway, it's getting late. I'm getting quite tired. Safs, thanks for the follow. It's been really good going through doing this triaging. It's been awesome going through this. I'm getting quite tired. I'm going to wrap up, but thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time, adios.